The ditch had been there longer than most people remembered, running along the edge of a forgotten stretch of farmland just outside Boone County. It collected everything the years had no use for anymore: broken fencing, rusted tools, and once in a while, machines that had simply been left behind. Most people drove past it without slowing down. Except Ethan Caldwell. He noticed things others ignored. It was late spring when he first saw it. Half buried, tilted awkwardly into the ditch like it had fallen and never been helped back up. At first glance, it didn't look like much, just another rusted shape swallowed by weeds and time. But something about the outline made him ease off the gas. He pulled over, stepped out, and walked closer. The grass brushed against his boots as he moved down the slope, eyes narrowing slightly as the shape became clearer. A tractor. Old. White paint, faded into a patchy mix of gray and rust. He wiped a hand across the side panel, clearing enough grime to reveal the lettering beneath. White 2 to 135. Ethan exhaled slowly. That wasn't just any machine. It had once been powerful, built in a time when tractors were made to last, when weight and torque mattered more than electronics. But this one had been left. The front axle was partially sunk into the dirt. One rear tire had collapsed completely, rubber split open from years of exposure. The cab windows were gone, leaving the interior open to weather, dust, and whatever had passed through over the decades. It looked finished, beyond repair. The kind of machine most people wouldn't even consider salvaging, which was exactly why Ethan kept looking. He crouched near the engine housing, brushing away more dirt, checking the condition of what he could see. The metal wasn't clean, but it wasn't rotted through either. That mattered. He moved around it slowly, taking in the details. The hitch was still intact. The frame, solid. Even the engine block, from what he could tell, hadn't cracked. It didn't look dead. It looked abandoned. There was a difference. A truck passed by on the road above, slowing slightly. A man leaned out the window. "You're wasting your time," he called down. "That thing's been there since before I bought my first farm." Ethan glanced up briefly. "How long's that?" he asked. The man shrugged. 40, 50 years. Nobody's touched it. Owner went under. Land got split up. That tractor stayed right where it dropped." Ethan nodded once, then looked back at the machine. 50 years. Most people heard that and saw the end of a story. Ethan saw something else. He climbed back up to his truck, but he didn't leave right away. He sat there for a moment, looking back at the ditch, thinking. Then he reached for his phone. The next day, he came back prepared. Chains, winch, tools, and a plan. By mid-morning, the sun was already warming the ground as Ethan backed his truck into position near the edge of the ditch. A neighbor, Mark, had shown up out of curiosity more than anything else. "You serious about this?" Mark asked, arms crossed as he looked down at the buried tractor. Ethan stepped out, grabbing the chains. "Serious enough to try?" Mark shook his head with a faint grin. "That thing's not moving. It's part of the ground now." Ethan didn't respond. He made his way down the slope again, attaching the chains carefully to the frame, avoiding the weaker, more rusted areas and securing them where the structure still held strong. Every movement was deliberate. No rushing, no guessing. Once everything was in place, he climbed back up and connected the chains to his truck. Mark leaned against the hood, watching. "This is gonna end one of two ways," he said. "Either that thing snaps in half, or your truck gives up first." Ethan climbed into the driver's seat. Only one way to find out. He started the engine, put it in gear, and eased forward. At first, nothing. The chain tightened. The truck strained slightly. The ditch held its grip. Mark let out a short laugh. "Told you." Then, a shift. Subtle, but real. The tractor moved. Just a fraction. Ethan didn't push harder. He stayed steady. Consistent pressure, letting the force build gradually instead of forcing it all at once. The chain creaked. The dirt around the wheels began to loosen. And then, with a slow, heavy pull, the white 2 to 135 broke free. Not cleanly, not easily, but it moved. Mark straightened, the grin fading into something else. "Well, I'll be." Ethan didn't stop. He kept the pull steady until the tractor was fully out of the ditch and resting on level ground. It looked even worse up close. 50 years of neglect showed in every inch. But now, it was upright, accessible, recoverable. Ethan stepped out and walked toward it again, breathing slightly heavier but focused. Mark followed behind. "You actually think you can get that running?" he asked. Ethan wiped dirt from his hands. "I think," he said calmly, "it deserves a chance." The real work started after that. Getting it out of the ditch had been the easy part. Bringing it back? That was something else entirely. Ethan hauled the white 2 to 135 back to his farm later that afternoon. The drive was slow, careful, every bump in the road reminding him just how long the machine had been sitting still. When he finally rolled it into his yard, it looked almost out of place, surrounded by working equipment, active land, movement, and in the middle of it, something that hadn't moved in half a century. He didn't rush into anything, didn't try to start it, didn't force anything that wasn't ready. Instead, he began with the basics: cleaning, clearing, understanding. He removed layers of dirt, debris, and rust carefully, exposing what had been hidden underneath for decades. The engine was seized, but not destroyed. The fuel system was dry, lines clogged, but intact. Wiring was gone in places, but not beyond repair. Every hour revealed something new, and with each discovery, the possibility grew. Days turned into a week, then two. Mark stopped by a few times, each visit carrying less skepticism than the last. "You're actually getting somewhere," he admitted one afternoon, watching Ethan work on the engine. Ethan didn't look up. "It's getting there." But he knew the real test hadn't come yet. Cleaning and repairing was one thing. Starting it, that was different. That was where most attempts failed. That was where time usually won. 3 weeks after pulling it from the ditch, Ethan stood beside the white 2 to 135 as the sun dipped low across his fields. The machine looked different now. Still old, still worn, but no longer abandoned, no longer forgotten. He climbed into the seat, adjusted his position, and reached for the ignition. For a moment, he paused, not out of doubt, but respect. 50 years. And now, it was about to be asked to move again. Ethan turned the key. The engine didn't start. Not yet. But it did something else. It turned. Slow. Heavy. But alive. Ethan's grip tightened slightly. Because that meant everything had just changed. He tried again. And this time, the machine answered. The first sound it made wasn't impressive. It wasn't smooth. It wasn't strong. But it was real. A deep, uneven churn rolled through the engine as the white 2 to 135 turned over again, metal waking up after decades of silence. The whole frame vibrated slightly, like it was remembering what it was built to do. Ethan didn't push it. He eased off, waited, let the machine settle. Then he tried again. This time, the engine caught, just for a second. A rough ignition, a short, stubborn burst. Then it died. Mark, who had been standing a few feet away, let out a breath. "That's more than I expected." Ethan nodded once, already thinking ahead. It wasn't failure. It was progress. He climbed down, checked the fuel line, adjusted the air intake, tightened a connection he had suspected might slip under pressure. Nothing dramatic, just small corrections, based on what the machine had just told him. Then he climbed back up, turned the key again. The engine struggled, then caught. Longer this time. Rough, uneven combustion shaking through the tractor as dark smoke pushed out of the exhaust. It sounded like something fighting its way back from deep inside itself. Ethan held it there. Steady, not forcing, letting it breathe. Seconds stretched. The engine stuttered, then stabilized. Not perfect, but running. Mark stepped back slightly, shaking his head in disbelief. "I don't know how you just did that." Ethan didn't answer. He was listening. The tone, the rhythm, the pressure in the throttle. All of it mattered. After a minute, he eased it down and shut it off. Not because it couldn't continue, but because it shouldn't yet. "Still needs work," he said simply. Mark let out a quiet laugh. "That thing sat dead for 50 years, and you're saying it just needs work." Ethan stepped down, wiping his hands. If it runs once, it can run right. That became the next phase. Not revival, refinement. Over the next several days, Ethan worked through every system with the same patience he'd shown from the beginning. He flushed the fuel tank completely, replaced filters, rebuilt sections of the fuel lines. He checked compression, adjusted timing, reinforced weak points in the wiring. Nothing rushed. Nothing assumed. Every change had a reason. By the end of the week, the white 2 to 135 didn't just start. It started clean. The engine still carried its age, but now it ran with strength behind it. The idle smoothed out. The response sharpened. The smoke reduced. It was ready. We're close enough to prove itself. That's when Ethan made the decision. Not to test it lightly, but to put it to real work. There was a section of land he had been preparing on the far side of his property, nearly 80 acres of heavier ground that needed to be turned before the next planting cycle. It was the kind of job most would assign to their most reliable, modern equipment. Ethan chose the white 2-135. Word spread faster this time. Not because he said anything, but because people had seen enough already. By the morning he rolled the tractor toward the field. A few trucks had already gathered near the edge of the property. Mark was there, and a couple of others. Not laughing, not doubting, just watching. Ethan didn't acknowledge them. He climbed into the seat, started the engine, and let it settle into that steady, rebuilt rhythm. Then he lowered the plow and drove forward. The first pass was everything. The ground resisted. Heavy, packed, the kind that tested both machine and operator immediately. The white 2-135 didn't surge, didn't strain wildly. It leaned into the load, deep, controlled torque pushing through the soil as the plow cut clean behind it. The engine dropped into a stronger tone. Stable, consistent. Ethan adjusted slightly, finding the balance point, then held it. From the edge of the field, Mark watched closely, arms folded. Shouldn't be doing that, he muttered under his breath. But it was. Foot by foot, the tractor pulled through, clean lines forming behind it. No stalling, no hesitation, just steady, deliberate work. Ethan turned at the end of the row and went again. Then again. Hour after hour, the white 2-135 continued. The sun climbed. The air warmed. Dust lifted into the sky in long, drifting trails. Still, the engine held. No overheating. No drop in power. No signs of failure. By midday, the pattern was clear. By afternoon, it was undeniable. This wasn't a machine barely surviving. It was working. Properly. Efficiently. As if the 50 years it had spent buried hadn't taken away what it was built to do. Ethan didn't stop. Not until the light began to fade. By then, most of the field was done. The remaining stretch waited quietly ahead. He paused only long enough to check the machine. Quick inspection, quick confirmation. Then he went back to it. The final passes came as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the land. The engine still steady. The pull still strong. And then, it was finished. All 80 acres. Turned. Clean. Complete. Ethan lifted the plow and brought the tractor to a stop. He shut the engine off. Silence settled over the field. From the edge, the small group of men stood still for a moment. Taking it in, Mark walked forward slowly, boots crunching against the dry soil. He looked out over the field, then at the tractor, then at Ethan. "You pulled that out of a ditch," he said quietly. "After 50 years. Ethan nodded once. "And it just did this," Mark added, gesturing across the land. Ethan didn't respond. He didn't need to, because the proof was already there. Not in words, not in claims, but in 80 acres of clean, finished work. Mark shook his head slightly, a faint smile forming. Guess it wasn't dead after all. Ethan glanced back at the white 2-135, sitting there in the fading light. Old, worn, but no longer forgotten. "No," he said, "just waiting." The wind moved softly across the field, carrying dust and the last warmth of the day. And for the first time in 50 years, the machine had done exactly what it was built to do. Not because it was new, not because it was perfect, but because someone had looked at it and seen more than what it seemed.